I suppose I should start at the beginning, because stories like this don't happen in a single night. They build, quietly, over years, maybe decades, until one evening comes along that changes everything you thought you knew about your life. For me, that evening was my husband's retirement party. David and I had been married for nearly 40 years. We weren't perfect, but who is? We had built what I thought was a strong life together, a home, a family, memories woven through decades. We had weathered losses, celebrated triumphs, raised children, paid off a mortgage, supported aging parents. Through all of it, I thought we had been partners. When we first married, I was 21 and still full of ideas about what marriage meant. I believed love was about devotion, about building a future together, about loyalty that would never waver. And for a long time, I thought we had that. David worked hard, harder than most men I knew. He was up before the sun, out the door in a crisp shirt, and often didn't come back until long after dark. He built his career step by step, always chasing the next promotion, the next big project, the next milestone. I told myself all those late nights, all those missed dinners, all those lonely evenings were worth it. Because one day, he'd retire. One day, it would all be behind him, and we would finally have our time. That was the dream. Our retirement years were supposed to be golden. Trips to places we had always said we'd go. Maybe a little cabin somewhere by a lake. Simple mornings together, coffee on the porch, laughing about nothing. That's what I held on to during all the lonely years. So when the announcement came that the company was planning a big retirement celebration for him, I was thrilled. I wanted to see him recognized, wanted to see him bask in the gratitude of all those people he had given so much of his life to. I wanted to feel proud, standing beside him, finally able to share in his success. I remember that day so vividly. I spent hours getting ready, which was unusual for me at this stage of life. I wanted to look well, not young, exactly, but I wanted to look like the wife of a man who had accomplished something. I chose a navy dress that fit me just right, elegant, not flashy. I clasped my pearl necklace, the one he had given me on our 25th anniversary. I wanted him to look at me that night and feel proud that I was the woman beside him. When we arrived at the venue, the place was filled with people, colleagues from every stage of his career, old friends, new ones, people I barely recognized and others I had seen at countless company functions over the years. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the kind of energy that comes when people gather to celebrate an ending and a beginning all at once. There were speeches, so many speeches. His boss spoke about David's dedication, his work ethic, his leadership. Younger employees talked about how he had mentored them, guided them, been a role model. Again and again, people used words like loyalty, integrity, devotion. And each time I heard those words, my chest swelled with pride. That was my husband they were talking about. My David. I smiled through all of it, mingled with people, listened politely to stories about projects I had never really understood. I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself, sharing in the glow of his accomplishments. But as the night went on, little cracks began to show, cracks I didn't recognize until later for what they truly were. At first, it was nothing more than glances. A woman, younger than me, though not by decades, kept looking over at David. She had dark hair, cut neatly at her shoulders, and a laugh that seemed too loud, too rehearsed. At first, I thought nothing of it. People admire a man at the height of his career, I told myself. She was probably just fond of him, grateful for his mentorship. But then I saw the way she touched his arm as she passed by him, casually, as if she had done it 1,000 times. The way her eyes lingered on him just a moment too long. And the way he looked back, not shocked, not confused, but with a kind of quiet acknowledgement. As though this was familiar, natural. I brushed it off. Or at least, I tried to. My mind told me not to be silly, not to create drama where there was none. We were surrounded by people, after all. Everyone was in high spirits. Surely, I was imagining things. But then, something happened that made my heart stop. I was standing near the bar, waiting for my glass to be refilled, when two women nearby began whispering. They must have thought no one was paying attention, but their voices carried just enough for me to hear. One of them laughed softly and said, "Can you imagine? She has no idea. After all these years they've kept it going this long." The other one replied, "It's almost sad. At least she'll never find out now." And then, the name. His name. David. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The blood rushed in my ears, and I gripped the counter to steady myself. Surely, they couldn't be talking about my husband. Surely, this was some kind of misunderstanding. There were plenty of men named David, weren't there? But the way they spoke, the way they giggled behind their hands, it was unmistakable. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone around me could hear it. My face flushed, and I could feel the sting of tears threatening to rise, though I blinked them back. Not here, not now. Still, a part of me refused to believe it. I told myself they were gossiping, exaggerating. Maybe they had the wrong idea. Maybe this was all some cruel misunderstanding. And yet, as I looked across the room at David, laughing, smiling, standing tall as people toasted his name, I felt a seed of doubt take root inside me. The party went on around me, but I no longer heard the speeches or the laughter. I saw only the glances, the touches, the too familiar smiles. Every moment of the evening replayed in my mind with new meaning, like someone had pulled back a curtain and shown me a different stage than the one I thought I had been standing on. By the time dessert was served, my hands were trembling so badly I could hardly hold my fork. I excused myself quietly, slipping out of the ballroom into the cool night air. I stood there in the parking lot, the sound of music and laughter muffled behind the doors, and I wondered, had my whole life been a lie? When I stepped outside into the cool night air, I thought the silence would calm me. Instead, it only made the pounding of my heart louder. I stood there, clutching my small clutch purse like it was some kind of anchor, staring up at the dim glow of the streetlights, trying to steady my breathing. Inside, I could still hear the muffled laughter, the faint music, the clinking of glasses. To everyone in that ballroom, it was a night of celebration. To me, it had suddenly become a night of suspicion, confusion, and dread. I leaned against the brick wall of the venue, telling myself over and over that I had to be mistaken. That it was gossip, nonsense, just cruel words spoken by people who didn't know what they were talking about. After all, I'd been married to this man for nearly 4 decades. If something had been going on, surely I would have known. Surely I would have felt it. And yet, the longer I stood there, the more I realized how much I had overlooked. The late nights at the office. The weekend trips that couldn't be avoided. The way he sometimes came home with a faint trace of cologne that wasn't his. How many times had I dismissed it all as paranoia, told myself I was imagining things, convinced myself he was just tired, stressed, overworked. I thought of all the times he said he was working late, and how often I had curled up on the couch with a blanket, convincing myself that one day it would all be worth it. A cold shiver ran through me. What if all those lonely nights had been lies? What if while I was waiting at home, planning dinners, imagining our future, he was with someone else? I closed my eyes, fighting back the sting of tears. I didn't want to cry here, in the middle of a parking lot, wearing the dress I had chosen so carefully for his big night. I didn't want to fall apart in public. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. "Are you all right?" It was David's voice. Familiar, steady, the same voice that had once comforted me through so many storms. I turned, and for a brief second, I almost smiled. The man standing there was my husband, silver hair, kind eyes, the man I had built my life with. I wanted to believe he was still the same person I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But then I remembered the glances, the whispers, the way those women had said his name. I steadied my voice as best as I could. "David, is there something I should know?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "About you. About her." The words hung heavy between us. I didn't say her name, I didn't even know it. But he knew exactly who I meant. I saw it in his eyes. For a long moment, he just stared at me. His face was pale under the streetlight, and his mouth opened as if to speak but closed again. And in that silence, in the hesitation, I already had my answer. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. Please. Just tell me the truth. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of years had suddenly fallen on him. Yes, he said finally, his voice quiet, almost broken. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. I felt my knees weaken. I gripped the side of the wall for support. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He couldn't look at me. Years. Years. The word echoed inside me like a thunderclap. Not weeks, not months. Years. My entire body went numb. I thought back on our anniversaries, our family holidays, the birthdays we'd celebrated, the vacations we'd planned. All those moments when I thought we were building a life together, and all that time, he was sharing pieces of himself with someone else. I shook my head, not even realizing tears were streaming down my face now. How could you? I never meant to hurt you, he said, his voice breaking. It just happened. I didn't plan it. I almost laughed, though it came out more like a sob. It didn't just happen, David. You don't accidentally betray your wife for years. He reached out, as if to touch my hand, but I pulled back. His fingers hovered in the empty space between us, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't want his touch. I thought of the woman inside. Younger than me. Prettier? Maybe. Fresher, at least. I thought of how easy it must have been for her, no responsibilities, no decades of history, no baggage. Just laughter and stolen moments. And me? I was the one who carried the weight. The bills, the home, the sacrifices. All for what? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to collapse into the grief that was threatening to consume me. But instead, I stood there in the cold night air, staring at the man I thought I knew, and realized I didn't recognize him at all. Was it worth it? I asked, my voice trembling. All those lies. All those years. Was she worth throwing away our marriage? He didn't answer. And his silence told me more than any words ever could. I turned away, unable to look at him anymore. I couldn't breathe in that moment. The walls of the life I had built were crumbling, and I didn't even know who I was without them. I left him standing there in the parking lot, walked to the car, and drove home alone. The road blurred through my tears. The dress I had put on so carefully that evening now felt like a costume, something I had worn to play a role in a life that no longer belonged to me. When I got home, the house felt different. Empty, though it was filled with all the furniture, the pictures, the reminders of the life we had lived. I wandered from room to room, touching the walls, the photo frames, wondering which memories were real and which were built on lies. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed we had shared for decades, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the silence, and wondering how many other women had been in my place before me. How many other wives had discovered, far too late, that their lives were not what they seemed. I thought of the years I had devoted to him, to us. I thought of the way I had believed in him, supported him, trusted him. And all of it had been betrayed. By the time the sun rose, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after David's retirement party, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cold cup of coffee. The house was quiet, but not the kind of peaceful quiet I used to imagine for our retirement. This silence felt heavy, suffocating, filled with all the words we hadn't yet spoken. He hadn't come home that night. Maybe he stayed with her. Maybe he just couldn't face me. I didn't know, and the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I looked around the kitchen, the same room where we had shared breakfasts, where I had packed his lunches, where we had laughed with our kids when they were small. Everything in that room felt like a photograph from someone else's life. When he finally walked in the next morning, I didn't say a word. He set down his briefcase, though why he still carried it, I'll never know. Habit, maybe. He looked at me with tired eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't recognize the man standing there. Can we talk? He asked softly. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw the mug in my hand against the wall and watch it shatter the way he had shattered my trust. But instead, I just nodded, because after 40 years of marriage, part of me still needed to hear him out. We sat at that table, and he started talking. About how it had happened. About how he never meant for it to go so far. About how she had been there during long nights at the office, when he felt underappreciated, when he felt old and invisible. Invisible. That word stung more than all the rest. Because wasn't I the one who had stood by him when he was just starting out? Wasn't I the one who believed in him when no one else did? Who kept the home, raised the children, made sure his life could run as smoothly as it did? But in the end, I had become invisible to him. He said he still loved me. He said he was sorry. He said he wanted to make things right. And maybe once, those words would have been enough. But sitting there, listening to him, I realized something that broke me even more than his betrayal. I didn't believe him anymore. Trust is fragile. It takes years to build, and only seconds to destroy. And he had destroyed it. That day, I didn't give him an answer. I told him I needed time. The days turned into weeks. I found myself replaying our entire marriage in my mind. Looking back at little moments, little signs I had brushed off. The business trips that didn't add up. The sudden changes in his schedule. The nights he came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I had been blind. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to see. Friends called to check on me after the party, asking how it had gone, and I forced myself to smile through the phone. It was lovely, I said. Because how could I explain? How could I tell them that the man they toasted, the man they praised for his loyalty, had been betraying me for years? Late at night, I lay awake wondering what my life would look like if I left. Could I really start over at this age? Find a new home, a new routine, a new version of myself that didn't revolve around him? Or would I be too lonely, too lost without the man I had built my entire adult life with? And yet, staying felt impossible too. Every time I looked at him, I saw not the husband I once adored but the man who had looked me in the eye and lied, over and over again. One evening, I went for a walk around our neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the houses, the trees, the sidewalks where I had walked 1,000 times before. And I realized something: the world hadn't ended. It felt like it had, inside me, but out here life went on. The neighbors watered their lawns, kids rode their bikes, the air smelled of fresh-cut grass. Maybe my life could go on too. I didn't have all the answers. I still don't. Some days, I wake up furious, ready to pack a bag and walk out the door. Other days, I feel a strange pull to stay, to try to salvage something out of the decades we spent together. But what I do know is this: my future no longer looks the way I thought it would. The golden years I imagined, of laughter, travel, companionship, have been replaced by something uncertain. A blank page I never expected to face at this age. And maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Maybe it's terrifying, yes, but maybe it's also a chance. A chance to choose myself for once. I look in the mirror now and see not just a wife, not just someone's partner, but a woman who has survived betrayal, heartbreak, and disappointment. And I am still standing. As for David, I don't know yet if he'll still be standing beside me when the dust settles. But what I do know is that whatever comes next, I will not be invisible anymore. If you discovered your partner's betrayal after decades of marriage, at the very moment you thought your future together was just beginning, what would you do? Would you forgive and stay, or would you walk away and start over, even later in life?